Today's topic is instructor-led training breaks at scale. Here's the fix. It's something that I hear a lot. Running ILT is hard. There are lots of moving parts. And what makes it so topical is that it's not getting any easier. Tighter margins, higher expectations, and even more things to coordinate when it comes to modern blended learning journeys. So it's not just about scaling your training, but scaling your impact as well. And if you get it right, it can really set you apart. Now, Karl Kapp has been exploring ways to scale his impact for over 27 years. He's a professor of instructional technology, a real systems thinker, and he's fresh from working with some of the best at LinkedIn on improving learning systems and delivery, specifically around blended and AI. Karl knows this problem from the inside. As an instructor, he's hit the same breakpoints that you have across operations, delivery, and content, and is always at the cutting edge of how AI can assist instructor-led training. Now, we've worked with Karl before, and what I love about him is that he's always putting the learner at the center and then comes up with innovative ways to solve their problems and enhance their experience. So, welcome, Karl. It's great to have you back with us today.
Andre, it's great to be back. I'm very passionate about this subject. I've been doing instructor-led training, all my life. And making some of the very problems that we're going to talk about today. So hopefully, helping people avoid those problems and really accelerate what they're doing to help others.
Excellent. And it really is an exciting time with lots of opportunity, but of course, lots of change as well. And I think that's what makes it a really topical subject today. So we're really interested in see where everyone's at out there and help them on their journey. But before I hand it over to you, Karl, I will just do a quick intro of Arlo software for those who are interested. Arlo is built for instructor-led training providers. We've helped thousands of training providers simplify their operations, scale their training, and deliver exceptional experiences to millions of learners around the world. We do this by bringing all the moving parts together into one unified solution, from scheduling, registrations, payments, communications, e-learning, certificates, whether it's delivered across public, private, live, online, and blended training. Now, the result is a modern and consistent experience for everyone involved, your learners, instructors, admins, business owners, and private clients, bringing them into this shared workspace. And that's exactly why today's conversation is so relevant. Scaling training isn't just about running more courses, it's about building the right model, the systems, and delivery approach behind the scenes, which is where Arlo is really proud to be here to help. And that leads us nicely into today's session, Karl. Again, it's great to have you, and I'll hand it over to you to get into it.
Yeah, Andre, thanks. It's great to be here. So, what we're going to we've got a lot of really great stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about the modern learning journey, where instructor-led training tends to break, and what we can do about it in terms of operational excellence, blended learning, and AI-assisted learning experience. Because you can't have a webinar in 2026 without mentioning AI, because it's really helpful. So let's just dive right in. So one of the things about the modern learner journey is a lot of us think that the instructional experience starts right here in the classroom, right? You get in, the instructor's there, and off you go. But actually, for the learner, it starts when they first decide to take the course, whether they're assigned by corporate or whether they individually are motivated to take the course. That's when the learning starts for them. That's when the whole process starts for them. And for the instructor, it really starts with the registration process. Once the learners get in, once they're registered, once they get started, that starts kind of the learning journey. So we really want to look at and examine the whole process. So we look at a website where you get your first impression, and that builds credibility of you as an organization, especially if you're a smaller organization. You want to build credibility because anybody can have a website. Registration, you want that to be frictionless as possible. You want it to flow really well. Find out where to register, find out how to do it, get the payment, get that done quickly. Scheduling, then letting people know about the time. I don't know how many times I've scheduled something and then 2 weeks out, and then the day before, if I hadn't gotten that email, I probably would have missed that session. So having those kinds of scheduling really help. Pre-work is always good to prime people for what you want them to learn. There are different ways to get them to actually engage in the pre-work. Invites and reminders, as I talked about, and day one ready, arrive prepared and know where to go, know where the logistics are, And then beyond that day of the event, right? We want to think about multiple sessions. How do they get the certificate? What's the ROI and impact to their organization? How do you even do more follow-up instruction? So think about the modern learner journey really starting from the very first inkling that they're going to take something that you're offering, and then how does that work? Can you reduce friction at each part? So we see that we've got lots of moving parts, right? Lots of stakeholders. You might have stakeholders being the learners, stakeholders being the organization that hires you to do the instruction. Stakeholders might be other instructors that you're working with, might be the admin team, lots of different stakeholders. And there's lots of pressure nowadays, as Andre mentioned, pressure to offer more value for less. How can you offer the highest possible value to the learners in a highly competitive landscape? Because it's AI, so anybody can produce AI slop on the internet and call it a course, even though those aren't courses. They don't have the expertise and the knowledge that we have that we're delivering. We need to protect our margins, and we need to think of quality as our differentiator. So if we're going to have and it is our differentiator. So if we're going to have a growth mindset, we really need to think about how can we manage all of those things and keep track of them so that we're most efficient. So where does instructor-led kind of training break? If we know where it breaks, we know where we can fix it. So one of the areas is operational inefficiencies. We're not doing as well as we'd like to in terms of getting everybody on board as quickly as possible. Delivery bottlenecks, outdated content strategies, all of these add up over time. So I like to think about the difficulty with manual processes, right? So we just get an email here, and we just put it into Excel, that's no problem. And then, the students log into another learning management system, that's no problem. Well, it doesn't seem like a problem, but if you have 5 processes that 5-minute process, and you have to do it, 11 times, that's an hour right there. And if you have to repeat those processes again and again, those hours really start to add up, especially with rekeying information. And if you ever have single person dependencies, right? Like, we can't get that sent out because Mary's not here. But as soon as Mary comes back, right? And it just drives you crazy. Well, how come other people than Mary can send it out? So these are hidden costs that really drive us to kind of insanity sometimes, drive us to want to throw our coffee on the computer, which I've been there millions of times. But we're also missing the opportunity cost. So a lot of you said, hey, I want to be able to create more content. That's my bottleneck, right? Well, the opportunity to create more content gets lost in sometimes people call it administrivia, right? The trivial but important things that get stuck, and we don't see them. We just kind of do them because that's the way that we've always done. And ultimately, the learner experience suffers, and sometimes our experience as the instructor suffers. I saw a term today called, instead of burnout, it was called rust out. And the idea was, instead of somebody like burning out in a job, they're slowly rusting away, being beaten down by the rain of manual processes, disconnected systems, and doing the same thing over and over again. So how can we avoid this rust out as we talk about it? So I like to think of it this way. We are dealing with all these training issues, and we're chopping down trees one at a time. And we say we want to scale. How are we going to scale? And often what we think about is, okay, let's hire 2 more lumberjacks, and then that'll help us cut down more trees. That'll help us scale. The problem is now I've got to buy, 2 hats for the guys, 2 new axes, more insurance in case they chop off their leg. I got to buy. So the scale, I might scale, but my margins might not improve. In fact, sometimes they might get worse because I'm now spending money in different places. And what often happens is we're so busy chopping down the trees that when the chainsaw salesman comes and says, hey, I can help you cut down trees a lot faster, you're like, nah, I'm too busy cutting down trees. I can't talk to you. And so if we can think about the automation of some of these processes, we can actually cut down a lot more trees. And this is very pertinent to me. I just had a tree fall in the backyard, and it's going to cost a lot of money to remove it. So trees are not a cheap element. So if we look at operational excellence, we can see some things that we might want to do. And the way to do that, and a lot of people don't think about this, is to do basically an audit of your friction points. So, where are you having problems in your organization? And look for small inefficiencies that add up over time, and that's going to break at scale, right? So, where is your team spending the time? Where are you spending the time? Where are your instructors spending the time? Where are your learners spending time? Are they frustrated with registration? Or they keep calling up and saying, hey, I didn't get that invoice, or hey, was that invoice paid? You have these kind of time sinks, and they don't seem big, but they do add up. And then where can you speed up the learner's experience? If they register today, but don't get the workbook for a week and a half, is that good timing? Could you send it earlier? What would be their least time to friction? And then finally, tracking things like commonly asked questions, how many manual steps you do, and the rekeying of information. And let's take an example, right? So I looked at a while back at common frequently asked questions. And we actually created a spreadsheet and we looked at the questions that we got. So questions like, how do I join? Or can I switch dates? And tracking, because you don't realize it, track how many times that really happens. Wow, people are asking like 27 times how that happened. We just need to add a button and a reminder email, maybe that will cut that down. And this will help you identify issues that you're having that are time sinks. And it uses, and you're like, well, I can't solve all these problems, but it uses a concept called the Pareto analysis, and also known as the 80-20 rule, which basically says that 80% of your problems are caused by 20% of your issues, right? So if you address those 20% of the issues, that'll address 80% of your problem. So you don't have to address everything, address that 20%, and that will reduce friction dramatically. So I encourage you to go through this exercise in areas where even if you don't think it's taking up a lot of time, you'll be surprised by the friction that you encounter. Now, once you've done that, we used to call this the USA principle: understand, systematize, and then automate. Although the US is not as popular as it once was, so maybe you just want to call it understand, systemize, and automate. But basically, the idea is that you then, once you understand your systems, you set up scalable systems and automate as much as possible. There are so many things automated nowadays, like course templates. So if you're thinking about how do I create more content, course templates are a good way to do that. Registration and payment, scheduling and logistics, email sequencing. Once a learner signs up, sequencing and sending those emails and keeping in touch with them is really important. You don't want them to cancel or decide that they're going to learn it somewhere else, right? Certificate creation and delivery. A lot of organizations need that certificate to hand to their manager to say, look, I completed this course. So it's important to get those. And then preempting common frequently asked questions. Now, I love this because as I was prepping with Andre and Mel, they said, what we call preempting. I'm like, no, what? We call that front foot common frequently asked questions. I'm like, oh, I learned. So when I'm in New Zealand, I'll be able to use the front foot term. But preempting really is the idea of, can you answer questions before you ever get them? So sometimes you can even send out a welcome video that answers a lot of questions. People tend to be more likely to watch a welcome video than they are actually to read stuff. Like you get so much in our email. So that's a good technique as well. And then also think about unlocking self-service elements. It's good for you, but it's even better for your learners. Learners nowadays like to be able to reach out. Everyone likes to be able to reach out to information, get it when they want, how they want. If you look at cable TV, right? It used to be that you had to watch television at assigned times because that's when that show was on. But now with Netflix, you can binge watch anything you want whenever you want. So consumers are really primed to do their own self-service. So why not do that in something like this? If they want to change courses, if they want to see what's upcoming, if they want to register fellow team members or access on-demand learning content, or even view and download their certificates or buy more courses, right? If you position it right, are the center of that information. If they've taken a course from you, they like how you present the course, they like the information you provide. Why not allow them to upscale that to more content from you? And finally, the one I really like a lot is the trainer app. So think about, again, it's 2026. Think about as a trainer going into an online or online virtual training or face-to-face experience, and knowing and matching. Like I would love to have it like match. Oh, that's John. John works for ABC company, and John is a manager. Oh, okay. Now I can put a name to the face because I have it right on my phone with the trainer app. I can see, oh, John's taken these courses, so he has a little bit of knowledge of this. Oh, okay, here's Mary, here's Jane, here's Juan. Like I get all that information right at my fingertips. So the self-serve helps not only the learner, but also helps the trainer be more self-sufficient and build those bonds with the learners as they come into the classroom or log onto the virtual space and have that live interaction. So it can be really helpful as a tool to have that. We used to print out sheets, right? When everybody come, oh, hey, John, and you look down your sheet, and oh, you do this or you do that. Have it access on a phone would be like fantastic. Okay, so, and what's it look like from a learner's perspective, right? So let's look at Felicity's learning journey. And the interesting thing here is, I used to work a lot in manufacturing, and you'd want to touch the material as little as possible. You'd want to transfer it as little as possible. And modern systems allow you to do that. When somebody registers on the website and gives you their information, if everything is integrated and you're not putting it from one system to another, or using another system to send out email, or using another system to deliver the content, or create the content in one system and upload it in another. If you do everything in one system, you are touching the content as little as possible. So here we have people register on the website. Maybe they pay right away. They get that information. They've got their invoice number. They could print it out. They could go back there if they needed to send that to accounting to get reimbursed. And then you get confirmation, and maybe you get multiple emails before you actually come to your event. Maybe, as I said before, a video. Then the learner completes the course. And again, we haven't changed anything, right? Everything is all the same. And then Felicity here, she's completed it, gets the certification, gets other documents like waivers, certificate of completion, and then gets messages and information about, hey, here's how you would print out the certificate. Here's additional information. So it really completes the whole learning cycle. And this is what we kind of want to think about. We think about these learning journeys and reducing friction. That leads us to operational excellence. Everything else will follow, right? So we manage the end-to-end learner journey in a single platform. You build a workflow for private or public training. You support in-person, virtual, and blended e-learning. You help the administrators, the instructors, the business owners all in one place. And finally, it's secure portals. So by streamlining operational excellence, you actually make it better for the learner, better for the instructor, and free up that time to create more learning. Now, when we create more learning, we want to think about learning as kind of a blended approach. And blended learning used to mean, you do a little bit of instruction here, you do a little bit here, but the term is really expanded over time to include even artificial intelligence as part of the blended learning process. So I like to think of blended learning as basically exploding the classroom, getting rid of things that cause problems. Now, blended learning, some people think, oh, well, that replaces the instructor. I look at it as it amplifies what the instructor is able to do. It makes the instructor, I think, more important than ever. Some of the content, maybe the evergreen content that's, everybody has to learn, that's not gray, but very like black and white, that's great. But the instructor doesn't have to deliver that. The instructor, the human element, is the judgment, is the wisdom, is the experience, is the knowing look. It's the hand on the shoulder. It's the wink, right? It's all that stuff that really makes learning both impactful and motivating. And instructors are going to be doing that forever. So let's take some of the burden off of the instructors and let them really shine where they shine. So another bottleneck, as I talked about chopping trees, is the hiring to scale, logistics, time-bound delivery. One of the most frustrating things I encounter as an instructor is I don't have time to cover that. That's a great question, but we got to stick on track, right? I know that's your industry does it slightly differently, but you'll just have to apply what we're talking about to what you're doing, right? And that doesn't always work. It gives diminishing returns. But now with the modern technology, we can remedy some of those issues, which is really kind of exciting. So think of blended learning as a scaling strategy. So instead of getting diminishing returns like hiring more people with axes, we hire more people with chainsaws. And what that does is, as I said, doesn't replace it, but multiplies the value of the trainer because now you can be more effective. You can have and achieve those better learning outcomes through this scaling strategy. You can get bigger, cover more information. And it turns out learners love the flexibility. So I teach a course in the summer here at Bloomsburg at Commonwealth University. And last year was the first year I said, hey, would you guys like some of this course to be asynchronous, self-paced, and some of it to be, instructor-led? And they're like, yeah, totally. Because we're on vacations, we're away, it's beautiful. Like I teach class from 6 to 9 at night. And in the summer, it's actually bright 6 to 9 at night. In the winter, not so much. But so they're like, Dr. Kapp, we just would like want to be outside. We don't want to be in your, as fun as it is, we don't be in your class for 3 hours in the middle of the summer, right? So the learners love that flexibility. They can do it whenever they want, in the morning, at lunch. And it's flexible for me because I can grade when it's flexible. So that adds additional value both for me as well as for the learners. And I can take that time and use it to create more interesting instruction. So it's the best of both worlds, instructor and self-paced. And it even increases margins because you can offer more learning opportunities. So if you do this, you want to be intentional about it, right? You want to think about you can't just take a course and chop it up and say, okay, we're going to do this as blended learning, right? You have to be intentional about it. You have to think about, how do I want to present this learning across time, across tools, and with different interactions? So don't just willy-nilly do it with a focus. So think about the instructor time shifting from content delivery to application of the knowledge. So in a world that we live in now, content is becoming abundant. Content is almost becoming a commodity. And commodity runs to the lowest possible price or cost, right? But application, how to do it right, how to understand it correctly, that's where, again, that instructor can come in and guide somebody through a process and help them achieve the application of the content. So it's not content alone, it's really content and application that increases performance, that makes people have mastery, those kind of things. And they come from things like multiple sessions or courses that leverage live, virtual, and self-paced instruction all together, right? Managed and delivered using pre-built templates. As a lot of people said, hey, I need to create content. Templates are very helpful. Branded portals for learners that they can go to and say, okay, what's the next logical step that I need to do? Where am I in my journey? And giving them that data and information is super helpful. And then engagement and completion metrics for the trainers. If I'm a trainer and I can very easily see where Karl is and 20 of his colleagues, I can say Karl's doing fine, but some of his colleagues, I need to send them a little extra touch, right? Let me do a personal email. Let me reach out for a phone call. People still actually do phone calls. So, or a text message if you want to go new school. So all of that can leverage what the skills of the trainer are for that experience. And that's something that I think is really valuable and really can take advantage of. So think of it this way, like, again, we're not blowing up a class. We're not taking pre-course objectives and, okay, here's 2 one-day work. Okay, we're done. No, we're thinking intentionally about it. So we've got pre-course objectives that we might want to give to a learner, have them experience it. Then we have our learning session. And the thing I like about the blended learning is, if you think about the old, 2-day workshops or 2 one-day workshops, like, oh my gosh, I have so much to cover in this workshop. I've got to get everything into this workshop. And I know, like, you've all, if you've ever taught an instructor-led class, you inevitably have a student come up to you and say, hey, my brain, I'm so fried, I can't even talk right. My brain is fried from all this content. I'm kind of overwhelmed, right? And then the next day, maybe they sleep on it and they're like, okay, I'm a little bit better. But still, that's a lot of content for me to absorb in one day. But with a blended learning example, what you could do is you could say, okay, I know in the day one workshop, I know I'm going to spread this out over time. So I'm just going to cover this and I'm going to help the people become really good at this. So let's do the e-learning session only focused on this, even though I know it's a bigger piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of a bigger puzzle. We're going to focus on this and then we're going to do the one-day workshop and we're going to apply it and we're going to get it. We're going to nail it. And then after that, we'll have another e-learning session and we'll go over that. And then we'll have another face-to-face session. And then we'll follow up that with an e-learning. And so basically what you're doing is spreading out the instruction so the learner doesn't become overwhelmed. And that idea of being overwhelmed is not just like, oh, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. Oh, I feel like my learners are overwhelmed. It's backed by research. People actually do have a cognitive overload after a certain amount of information. And so spreading out that information, both through these sessions, but also during the one-day workshop. If you don't have to cram everything into that, you can give more space to breathe during the live face-to-face. And that's more valuable than people give it credit for. You know, we always think, oh, we got to cover as many things as possible to help, everybody get the value for the instruction. But really, it's helping them master. They're not buying a course, they're buying mastery. They're buying their ability to apply that information. They're buying the ability to be able to perform in a certain situation. That's what they're buying. And so when we actually help them achieve that, we're adding a tremendous amount of value. So what we run into sometimes then, so we've got this strategy, right? We're going to spread it out over time. We're going to do that. But we still might have an outdated content strategy, right? We might have this thing that I talked about, too much content. It might be really hard to keep the content up to date. We might have consistency issues. Somebody wrote this part, another instructional designer wrote this part, somebody added this but way back when, somebody added this way back when, nobody went and looked at the redundancies. I have to do that every time I deliver the class. Sometimes it's difficult to access the information, or where is that, so you have this outdated strategy. So you might have a blended learning. Yes, this is the way we're going to spread it out, but the content that we're spreading out might itself be outdated. So we want to think about how do we update that. So I love this image. So we've all been in this experience. So we've got like Nikola Tesla in class. We've got Albert Einstein in class. We've got perhaps Isaac Newton in class, and then we got Lloyd Christmas from the movie Dumb and Dumber in class, and we've got to figure out how to navigate and then regular IQ people, and we have to figure out how to navigate all these different learners in our one learning session. So our content strategy needs to be devised to help this variety of knowledge, that people have, so that everyone can get value out of what we're offering in a stand-up trainer environment. So there's ways to do that, which can be really kind of helpful as we think about it. So one way is to think about creating a relevant and personalized journey that caters to different learning preferences. So for example, you could have a pre-reading ebook, or you could have a manual guide that somebody reads through, right? So you can think about what are different ways I can deliver this content to different types of folks. Same content, but different ways to deliver it. Now, in the old days, before AI, making 4 variations of a piece of content, that's a lot of work. Now, you can use AI to create those variations very quickly. Now, you as the human in the loop still have to make sure that AI didn't corrupt the content, which can happen. But it's not like you're creating it from scratch. It's not like you have to develop from scratch. So today I was in AI today, and I took some of my slides. I said, make this an interactive website, right? Boom. Now I have the slides and the interactive website. Make this into an infographic. Make this into a PDF. Make this into a quiz, right? Very easily you can do that. So when we think about the content strategy, we might have the pre-work, we might have a course quiz we want somebody to take. The quiz might actually determine which content you get later on because you nailed this part of the quiz, but you didn't get this part of the quiz. Then we might have our live training, a virtual workshop. We might have the people come in, answer specific questions that people have. Hey, in your organization, what's happening? How can I help you? In your organization, what's happening, right? Then we have the in-person training in the classroom, right? We could have videos as well for the learners. You look at this video, you look at this video, you look at that video, right? We can do 3 different videos, because if we're saving time in operations or some of the instructor bottleneck, maybe we have more time to make different videos for different learners. And say, hey, let's do one on aerospace, and let's do one on insurance, and let's do one on accounting. So we have different focuses for each of those content areas, even though we're teaching leadership across the board, right? That allows people to hone in on their industry. Here's what's unique about aerospace and leadership. Here's what's unique about leadership and the insurance industry, right? You can kind of add those different videos. Online resource libraries, we can parse those. We can do practical assessments, in a live environment, or even online through virtual simulations. We can do surveys and have the certificate. So think about how you can update the content journey for the learners that are going through that process. Now, we also want to position it as ongoing. So it used to be that learning was an event. You went to learning, you did your learning, you were done with learning, you went back to work. We don't live in a world where that's possible anymore. We need to be constantly learning, and it's almost impossible to learn everything about anything. I have a friend who, every time I meet him for lunch, he's like, hey, Karl, have you done this in AI? I'm like, no. Have you done this in AI? I'm like, no. I'm like, hey, Dave, I don't have enough time to keep up with all of these things. Oh, you have to, but it's impossible, right? I try to keep up with as much as I can. But that's not just in AI, that's in every field, the medical field, the insurance field, the aerospace field. Every field is changing all the time. So can you give people pre-readings that they can keep up to date? And also post-readings. Like if you capture someone's attention in a post environment, in a learning environment, they'll actually more likely to see the post readings. I do conferences, and every time I go to the conference, they want me to do a book signing. And every time I do a book signing before my session, like nobody shows up. It's crickets. Once I do my session, I have more people show up because you captured their attention. They liked what you said. So post readings are a really good element to add to your instruction. Micro learning reminders. Hey, here's a 5-minute micro learning on this. Here's a 5-minute on this. Additional course offerings. Hey, if you like this course, you're going to like this course, right? Just again, like Amazon, like Netflix, people, if they like the content, they like the way you deliver it, they're going to want to consume more of it. And I like bonus modules. So, hey, they're slightly related to the topic, but might be a more deep dive, or might be a different perspective, or might be totally sideways to the topic. But now you can offer them, hey, if you love this about leadership, wouldn't you like to know about critical thinking? Here's a whole module on critical thinking, right? Get people going down those different pathways of learning. The focus really is on helping the learner, as well as reframing our consideration as a continuous learning process. We're always learning. We should always invest in learning, always think about how we can help people learn. And then the final part of this is, if we're positioning learning as ongoing, we need tools. The managers of the learning itself need tools to manage the ongoing learning, right? Where it's a scale thing, right? If we want to have more ongoing learning, we need to have more tools to manage that ongoing learning. So think about, again, a coordinated system so that you don't have to manage all these with disparate systems. That is a nightmare. So let's get to AI. As I said, it's time to talk about AI and see what happens with AI in terms of classroom instruction, virtual instructor-led instruction. And the first thing, and a lot of you said this, is content creation. So you can now easily update modules with AI prompts, with PDFs, with your old PowerPoints. It's time to leverage that skill of AI. Convert existing training materials into e-learning. So take a look at what you have, and can you create an e-learning out of that? And then not just, and don't think of e-learning like, okay, I just want my slides online. That would be great, and people can click through them. Online learning is a little bit different and leveraging the tools. You want to create interactive quizzes, for example. People love to know like where they are with knowledge and information. So creating interactive quizzes is a good way to allow learners. Remember how we talked about self-service? It allows them to self-assess in a safe environment. I take the quiz. I didn't do as well as I thought. Okay, now I'm going to go back and do this. The other thing that you could do is in a classroom environment, if you're giving quizzes, you can also have a link to, hey, here's a more in-depth quiz, right? We're not going to take it now. We don't have time to take it now, but afterwards, you may want to take this more in-depth quiz, and that can be helpful as well. We already talked about the microlearning and all that kind of stuff. And then converting existing materials, as I said, into SCORM. Now you can track and evaluate how people are doing. Now, another thing to think about is what AI can do as a co-facilitator. So imagine running an instructor-led event and you have AI right by your side. Now, a really interesting and cool thing I've done is I've created an AI agent. I call her Jane. And Jane is on my phone because if you haven't downloaded any of the AI apps to your phone yet, you're missing out because they can talk to you and you can talk to them. So I often have Jane as a co-facilitator and I'll banter back and forth. Hey, Jane, we're talking about instructional design concepts. What do you know about the evaluation step, formative and summative? And then Jane kind of gives that instruction. And then I say, okay, Jane, that's really interesting. Now how about audience analysis? Tell me about that, right? And we have that. And then what I'll do is I'll give Jane, the link to Jane, to the learners, and then they can use that before and after. So I can use AI to clarify concepts and have that bantering back and forth, even though it's just me. You can also use, I'm just laughing because I gave a presentation one time where I kind of voiced over some slides. This is way well before AI. And I said, okay, what can we do to like improve this? And I meant the content, and one of the women goes, well, your voice, we heard it for the whole voiceover. I would have liked some variety. And I'm like, okay, that's not what I asked for. That's not what. So now we can have variety with the AI as the co-facilitator. But also think about things like add additional examples. So you could say to everyone, hey, I'm teaching you about leadership skills in different industries. And ask your AI chatbot, ask Jane to give an example that's specific to your industry. Boom. Now people can get that specific instruction. You can actually ask the learners to compare personal ideas against alternative viewpoints. Hey, ask AI to give you an alternative viewpoint to what I'm telling you, right? So you can broaden their instruction. Hey, don't take my word for it. Ask them. You can capture notes like you do in Zoom. You can do summaries after the activities. You can send those out. If you do a live virtual session, use AI to summarize the virtual session, edit the notes as you want, and send it out. And now you have a nice summary of the instructional elements that you covered. So that can be very helpful. You can also think about it, so that's one way in general, but think about it as the 3 before, during, and after class. So before class, it's the advanced organizer. You send out Jane to get them thinking about the subject and interacting with the subject right away. And if you capture some of that, you can get a mini audience analysis. What was the audience concerned about? What are they thinking about? Where are their friction points? You can see how many learners, even with AI, have completed their assignments. And you can leverage that, right? If they haven't completed their assignments, maybe you want to spend a little bit more time up front. Or sometimes I've done this, I've had an in-class pre-work assignment. So for the first 10 minutes of class, we're all going to go over this content and take the quiz. So I know everyone is at the same level. So that's a possibility as well. And it provides a rich background information. So you can provide that background information to the learners before they attend. Use your instructor app to see who's taken that or who hasn't. Take a look at it a couple days before the event. Send out reminders to the people that haven't. I can tell you that just send it to the people that haven't done the pre-work. If you've done the pre-work and you get that generic message that says, hey, Whether you might have done the pre-work, and if you did, thanks. But if you haven't, I'm like, you don't even know if I've done it. You don't even know. That's just frustrating. It doesn't have to be like that now with modern day tools. You can look the toggle. Did Karl do the pre-work? Yes. Okay, we're not going to send that message, or maybe we'll send, hey, thanks for doing your pre-work. It's really going to come in handy when we start class. And then other people, you could send out an email, hey, you didn't do your pre-work. You might want to, because 90% of the people have already done their pre-work. Like, you can use those statistics to leverage that experience. Now, in class, as I mentioned before, you could ask everyone, hey, based on your industry, interact with the chatbot this way. It allows some independent work, yet structured. I have a class where I have a facilitator bot. I have students go over a game, pick apart the game, and then the facilitator bot debriefs them about that game. And then we do together. It's a think, pair, share exercise, right? I have them play the game and think about it. I pair them with the AI, and then I have them share with the rest of the class. So the idea is to ask them provocative questions. And so they're not sitting in the classroom thinking, oh, how's the weather there? Or how are you doing, right? It's all focused on the content for that particular time frame. And it's also a tool that can catch up people who are behind, right? You can say, hey, if the person seems to not know the knowledge or content, give them this additional information, right? Help them get up to speed. So you can do that mid-session. It's a good gut check. It's a good way to help with the pacing. And then follow-up. We know that follow-up to learning is important because of the thing called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which means once we have class and it was great, fantastic, a week later, we start to forget. A week later, we start to forget. So when we first learn something, we immediately start forgetting it. But if we have a booster that reinforces that knowledge, it helps prevent forgetting. It helps refresh our memory. And if we do that over time, we'll keep the content top of mind, which can be really important as we think about what we want to do for the learners and help the learners to be successful. Now, this is all good stuff that can help, but you might be asking yourself, what does this look like? So I'm going to ask Mel to put the link into Zoom, but this is a post game I developed, right? So trying to get people to do pre-work is one thing. You could use a game to help them do that. Post-work is another thing. So I used Claude and said, Claude, I want you to create a game about instructional design, and I want it to do the following. And so I gave it some instructions and things like that. And then made this link available. I'm going to do the easy mode because I'm in front of everybody. But I made this game available to my students who then go out and play it. Almost 100% of the students go out and play the game. And it's really, really simple. You just kind of answer a couple of the questions. And you have this little guy here, and he moves around chased by these green dots. It's not the world's most sophisticated game, but consider the alternative of just asking questions. And you have to know your audience. You might immediately be saying, Karl, my audience would never go for this. Then don't do it. If your audience is very super serious and they don't want to do this, that's fine. But if you have an audience that can have a little bit of a tolerance for the game or the game activity, go ahead and add that in, or make it more like scenario. It doesn't have to be like a little dude square running around the game. Have it be more scenario based. And that way they can actually experience what they want, but in a more, serious, it always goes back to knowing your audience. So none of these tools that I'm talking about, none of these experiences that I'm talking about are going to be the magic pill for everyone. They're going to be used strategically. So do this strategically. Okay. So that's one way and you can play that game. And I probably lost you now that you're all playing the game. But another thing that you can do is we can go ahead and add with AI a chatbot to our websites. So or to our courses. So here's a chatbot that I've developed. I'll show you the chatbot, and Mel's going to put a link in the chat for you actually to build your own. So there's a 6-step process. It seems like a lot, but it's very simple. It does, you have to pay a little bit because it's AI, but it can be very helpful. So here, for example, I put this chatbot on my website, and the chatbot then specifically answers questions that I have. So I asked the chatbot to not sell right away. This is a prospecting chatbot. I also have course chatbots. But this says, hey, most L&D folks, they're trying to keep up. What does your development look right now? Lots to develop, but no time. So you can put that in there, and then it's going to respond specifically to me with the content from my L&D Mentor Academy. So that information is what can be used to help these conversations. And so thanks for a little while, and we'll come back and give me that information. So you can actually create your own content specific chatbots, and they can be really, really helpful for figuring out how to deal with 24/7 accents. And of course, in the demo, something goes wrong. Unbelievable. Okay. You'll have to trust me that worked literally right before the demo. And of course, it's a demo. But basically, you can put these in your courses and it can answer questions in a course as well. So the key takeaways I want to focus on today are growth reveals broken systems. So sometimes you think growth is going to solve a problem. It actually exacerbates a problem. So map your friction points before you scale, and it'll allow you to scale. The right systems will free your team to focus on growth, not administration. Blended multiplies the value of every trainer you have, and eventually will improve your margins as well, which is what you want. Use AI to extend instruction, like pre-work, chatbots, all that good stuff. And keep in mind that better operations equal better learning experiences. So if you're flustered and disorganized, the whole learning experience will feel flustered and disorganized. It's the same problem. So use what's available now to help deal with those small friction points that are becoming larger. And think about this. Growth doesn't create chaos, it reveals chaos. And organizations that scale successfully, they don't add more instructors or more emails, more spreadsheets, more email systems. What they do is they redesign the learner's journey. And that's what we're in a great opportunity to do in this day and age, is redesign the learner's journey to maximize your impact on the learner. And I think that's really kind of exciting. So I'd like to open it up now to some questions. Andre, do we have some questions as I was going through the presentation?
We do have some questions, and I just wanted to make one comment about the use of AI. And I think it's important to note that the expertise of the instructors, of their domain expertise, of all the content that they've created around their courses, that's the key input into AI to then have a really valuable experience. It's not just about saying, "Hey, AI, can you create this for me?" It's actually leveraging your expertise, which is your IP. So I think that's something important to point out, when you create chatbots, when you create content, all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great point.
there was one question around blended, and it was around just kind of how to get started, how to approach it. And so I was wondering, what are some kind of high impact entry points into blended? And our customers, about half of our customers offer blended, but there's a bit of a scale there. Some it's as simple as sending a pre-reading doc, but then on the other side, it's this really kind of interesting multi-session journey that we're talking about. But yeah, what are some good entry points to add a bunch of value into their offerings, moving into blended?
Yeah, so I would look at I would look at a couple things. One, I would look where do learners seem to be having problems, right? And so that's one way that you can help. So I know somebody's saying it's blocking, but I can't see the chat if I keep that up. So I won't look at the chat. So the idea is that take areas where learners have struggled, and that's a good place to add additional blended content. Take a look at where you need foundational knowledge before you hit a point that you want to make. That foundational knowledge is a good area to break off as a blended learning piece. Take a look at where learners kind of diverge in their, if you have them in a classroom or in a training session, and some learners want to talk about this element and some want to talk about this element. That's good element. Those are good elements to put into a blended learning as well. What I tend to do is I look at where am I as the instructor offering the most possible value, right? In application and areas where they need specific clarification, in a particularly hard area that needs some extra motivation. Look at those kind of things. And those are what I will not put online. And then I will take the online, foundational knowledge, basic knowledge, knowledge that people get pretty easily, and put that into the blended session. And I'll typically do like a little pre-quiz as advanced organizer. Then I'll do some content and e-learning module. And then I often will give two branches if somebody wants to go here or here, and then have the instruction, and then do another e-learning module, kind of do it that way. So that's one way to think about breaking up the blended learning process.
Yeah, and from our perspective, I think that's 100%. It's around maximizing that time in the classroom, things around peer learning and everything you talked about. John also asked, how we help scheduling a blended learning class bundle. So that for us, there's two parts to that. One is creating the content. So, we've removed a bunch of barriers around having an AI authoring tool. So, as mentioned, you can drop some of your existing content outlines, etc., and spin that into different e-learning modules to address some of the things Karl's talking about that you don't want to spend time in the classroom, some of the pre-learning from some of the foundational knowledge or some of that post-reinforcement. And then second thing is around just coordinating those moving parts, which I think is what you're talking about with the bundle. We offer multi-session, and within that multi-session course, as they sign up to it, all that stuff is automated around the instructions, and there's a lots of kind of flexibility in how you deliver those multiple sessions. It could be live online, it could be in the classroom, or it could be some of that e-learning content. So you can schedule that into a course that's templated, and it kind of takes care of all those moving parts and sends those pieces of e-learning content, the modules, at the right time with the instructions, all that kind of thing. So that really helps you think about it in a more innovative way, as opposed to just sending something attached. You can really think about, the best time that it's available, and best time that it's sent to your learners as well. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? There was some a good comment from Julia around sending asking for reflections from their class, and they had a huge uptake on that, and I think that helps reinforce their learnings and giving them time to respond. So, is there any other things that you've seen work really well, Karl?
So I actually created a reflection bot. So at the end of the class, I asked students to go through the reflection bot, which actually asks them questions like, what was the key thing that you learned today? How are you going to apply what you learned today? What was something that might be an obstacle to applying what you've learned today? So that's a really kind of an interesting way to get the students to reflect. It's great to have them reflect with each other if they're willing to do that. And if you've created a safe learning environment, often they are. But sometimes it's also helpful to have this kind of private reflection as well. And so the AI chatbot, people are strangely more willing to like spill their guts to a computer than they are to another person. So sometimes that works out pretty well.
Excellent. And there's a comment around micro learning, and I think that's really important as well, not giving them a massive piece of content. And again, you've got that IP, so how do you split that into kind of more high impact, short micro learning modules? And there's lots of flexibility around that.
Yeah,
We've got to kind of, sorry, you go.
oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, the only caution I have about microlearning is just don't take an hour long course and chop it up into 6 10 minute pieces or 10 6 minute pieces, right? Be intentional about, okay, this is the one objective I'm going to teach in this micro learning. Okay, in this micro learning I'm going to teach this objective in this micro. So do it that way, and you'll have a much better uptake of the micro learning. It'll be more impactful.
We're seeing some customers kind of, they have the content and they're kind of creating a quiz, for instance, being quite intentional about it. But the difference that they apply to it is the audience, say they're doing first aid and the audience is office tech learners. They say, what are some relevant examples for that environment? And it's having the ability to be quite agile in that kind of development to make it really relevant. We've got a bigger question, a bigger picture question from Zane here. With AI making content creation easier than ever, what do you think will differentiate successful training providers in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think two things. One, the quality of the content, right? If you create something with AI, it's AI. And there are so many telltale signs that it's created with AI. But if you go in there and you say, this is my IP, these are my stories, this is my history, this is my experience, and you create your course around that, certainly AI can help or avoid the blank page syndrome, but that's going to be a differentiator. I actually think there's going to be two tiers of kind of learning, if you will. One will be the AI slop commodity courses that anybody can make and take, but then there's going to be the high quality, almost like the difference between like a common car brand and a luxury car brand. And I think the successful training providers are going to be the luxury car brand because they're going to take a little bit more time to craft the instruction, a little bit more time to think about the interactions, a little bit more time to be intentional and deliberate with the learners, a little bit more time to just motivate the learners, not just give them content, a little bit more time to connect with the learners. Like all of those extra things that if you streamline your operations, you'll have time to do is going to differentiate you from somebody that's just spitting out courses and being intentional about the learning and making sure that the learning journey ends up in learning. Um, if content alone could teach, then we all would already would know everything just from books, right? But it doesn't. We need instructional strategies. We need the instructor, looking at your face and seeing that you're confused. You need the idea of uh, I've been there. I've seen it. Here's mistakes that people have made. Here's how we fix those mistakes. Like those kind of human elements, those kind of human touches, I think are what's really going to differentiate, the AI slop from the organizations and trainers that are going to be successful.
We couldn't agree more. We've looked at some trends over the years, the big shift to e-learning self-paced and the high drop-off rates. And it's not to say there's not a place for that, for the kind of self-driven, self-paced learning. But the role of human-centered learning drives massive, learner outcomes. It's more effective, it's better applied, and ultimately that's the goal of training. It's not just for the sake of it. It's actually to change behaviors to drive learning outcomes. And that's where that human at the center, human in the loop is so important. I think with the shift to a lot of this AI, I think actually the value of these kind of human-centered human experiences, both the instructors, their expertise, but also the peer learning element is actually going to increase in value. But it is around kind of you have to be realistic. You have to compete with what's out there. So that's where kind of operations and delivering more modern kind of learner journeys, I think is really going to be important as you differentiate.
So there's a futurist that said, the future is never or, it's always and. And so we're going to have online instruction and we're going to have instructor-led instruction. What makes those work in combination is that key intentionality that we talked about today, and that this audience probably all, you wouldn't be here if you didn't have that level of intentionality. And that's going to be what's going to make you successful.
Awesome, Karl. Well, we're out of time. We're 2 minutes over, so apologies, everyone. Is there any closing thoughts, Karl? Kind of spending an hour, that time just flew by. But any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
It did fly by. So my closing thought is that this is a opportunity. This is a great opportunity that we have. We have never had more tools, more ability to get our training message out to the learners to help the learners be as effective as possible. And so why would we not leverage every tool that we have to make the learners experience as flawless as possible so that they can focus on the important thing is, as you said, the behavior change, the knowledge change, the performance that we know we can elicit because we've been doing this. So those are the elements that I think that I'm very optimistic about.
I love it, and it's never been more important with such shifts and what people need to learn in the changes in the market. So please, I know everyone is so busy, but don't ignore that chainsaw salesman. Have a look at what's out there, and suddenly, things could be a lot different in a few months' time if you free up some of those bottlenecks. Well, thanks everyone for spending a full hour with us. We really do appreciate it. We know time is precious. Thank you, Karl. It's always a pleasure. I love chatting, and it's been fun working on the content with you. And I'll let everyone get on with their day wherever you are in the world. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.